Okay, good morning. Today is the 19th day of Shvat, and it's the 10th of February. We're up to the 6th reading of Parshat Yitro, and this is the core of the portion this week, because in the 6th reading we have the 10 Commandments. But what I want to focus on is not in the 10 Commandments themselves. There's so much to say about this. It's actually not such a long reading, and it's far less words than one might think. A lot of times people think the Ten Commandments are quite long. They're actually just 620 letters altogether. 620 is the value of keter, the value of crown. And it's also the value of 613, the number of positive and prohibitive commandments in the Torah, plus the 7 commandments either that were already given to Adam and Noah, which create the what we call the Noahide laws, or they represent the 7 commandments innovated by the sages in the Second Temple period. In any case, the 10 Commandments begin with an introductory verse. And this verse is in Exodus 20, verse 1. I'll read it in Hebrew first. Vaydaber Elokim et kol hadvarim ha'ele leimor. And it's translated, Moses went down to the people, God then spoke all these words, saying, it's altogether, it's 7 words and 28 letters. Now, the fact that there are 7 words and 28 letters and this is the same structure, and this is sometimes something that we do when we look at the Torah, we look at the structure of the verse. So 7 and 28, 7 words and 28 letters is exactly the same structure as the first verse of the Torah. There's not many verses like this, but certainly this verse is special because the sages say that the first verse of the Torah, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz, is also an introductory verse, meaning and Rashi brings this in his commentary. He says you should read it as, when in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, then the earth was chaotic and void and so on. So you should read it like an introductory, when in the beginning, like once upon a time. Once upon a time when God created the heavens and the earth, it was so and so. Here too, it's an introductory verse. God spoke all these things saying, meaning all these things are of course the 10 Commandments, and saying them to the people to repeat afterwards to all the generations. But there's another thing that is surprising about this introductory verse, which is that notice that it uses the name Elokim. It uses God's name in what we call the plural form, the Elokim, which usually designates nature. That's the way it's usually understood by people. And that's surprising because it says God, meaning Elokim, spoke all these words. And what's the next verse? The first of the 10 Commandments. I am Havaya, your God. And so he switches. He's saying, the introduction is Elokim spoke all these words. And then he switches to I am Havaya, your God. So that's a very interesting thing. Why, if this is very essential, that the 10 Commandments versus the 10 sayings of creation are a revelation of a higher essence of God, which is called Havaya, his essential name. Whereas Elokim is the way that he reveals himself through nature. So it's very surprising, I hope you understand, that the introduction to the higher revelation of Havaya would be with the name Elokim. Elokim spoke all these words saying, I am Havaya, your God. That switch from Elokim to Havaya is not so easy to understand. So just first of all, to understand the question. The question is, Elokim is usually related to nature, and God is now giving the 10 Commandments which are a notch of revelation higher than nature, which is already his speaking to us as the one who took us out of Egypt. That's above nature. That's supernatural. So the name Elokim actually has two meanings. In general, when we say that Elokim equals nature, right? Elokim is equal to 86, and Hateva, nature, is equal to 86 also. What we mean to say is that nature conceals God, meaning that when God created the world, nature, He made nature in such a way that through nature you wouldn't see Him. You could think that maybe He exists, like Abraham discovered Him by looking at nature, and Maimonides writes in the beginning of his book that what is the way to know God? By contemplating nature. But we all know that there's a lot of scientists who contemplate nature, and they don't necessarily come to an understanding of godliness. I'm not even talking about personal God. I'm even talking about the sense that everything is one, that everything is ruled and governed by one single principle, by one single God. That's not always the case, even with very good scientists. Some of them do, some of them don't. Because nature conceals godliness. And now if we're not contemplating, certainly what you see in front of you, the screen that you see in front of you, it's using natural laws, electromagnetism and so on. And the fact that you have clothing on you and it always fits the same way, and our bodies don't change so much overnight, and we don't grow and we don't get smaller, the clothing doesn't change. All these laws of nature, they're what we come in contact with every day, but they don't really reveal godliness. What they reveal is that nature has laws, which is a very important thing. We wouldn't be able to live without it, but it's natural laws that conceal God. So that's one meaning of the name Elokim, but there's another meaning to it, and that's the meaning in this introductory verse to the Ten Commandments. It also means contraction or concentration. The sages say that when God spoke the Ten Commandments, the first word He said was Anochi, I am, and that word is an acronym. It's the initials of Ana Nafshi Ktaviti Havit. I am giving myself in these words. Meaning, when we study Torah, Torah is not just the word of God in the sense that He spoke it and He's now separated from it. That was the case when He created the world. When He created the world, we call it the 10 sayings. Let there be light, let there be grasses, let there be a sun and a moon, and so on. Those sayings distanced God from the words that He said, which is why nature conceals Him. So when I look at the sun and the moon, all I see is the sun and the moon. I don't see godliness within it, because those words are like a human speech, where when I say the words, they come out of me and they're no longer connected to me. For that reason, nature conceals godliness. But in the 10 Commandments, I gave myself in these words, meaning I wrote myself into these words. God is saying that when you learn Torah, it's a completely different type of Elokim. It's Elokim in the sense of concentration. What does that mean? That the infinite has now made itself, again because the infinite is all-powerful, omnipotent, it made itself, God made Himself enter into the words of the Torah, so that every word from the Torah that you're reading is really a connection to the infinite itself. So here Elokim is not acting as a visor, it's not acting as a curtain that's concealing God. It's acting as a vehicle that's concentrating Him. Concentrating so that the infinite can enter into the finite. And that's the thing to remember, we talked about earlier this week, that the act of giving the Torah was not a one-time event. It's an event that is always happening. Why? Because it's not happening just at the finite level. It's actually the infinite entering into the finite. And so the infinite aspect of that event is always present. It's always everywhere. In the finite dimension of time, when we talk about time, there was one moment in which God concentrated Himself and gave the Torah. But in essence, where in the dimension of the infinite, there it's an event that's happening all the time. It's constant. And again, you could say that even the words of the Torah are infinite at a higher level. When we touch upon them, we get a finite book, a book that we can lift up, because that's the power of concentration. That's what we call tzimtzum, the ability of the infinite to bring himself into the finite. And so with that thought, it's a good thought to go into Shabbat with, because Shabbat is like a taste of that in time, that you get the essence of godliness within 24 hours. So I wish everyone Shabbat Shalom, and I hope to see you. I'm probably not on Sunday, unless we can figure something out, but to see you on next Monday, Parashat Mishpatim, and maybe the first day we'll do both the first and second reading, something from both, so that we have something from both, or maybe we'll figure out something for Sunday. It's good to see everyone.
Let's shoot for something. If we're going to do it on Monday, maybe we can start 5-10 minutes earlier. So
Okay.
we can cover both.
We'll try.
We'll try.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.